Come on. There it is. There it is. It functions. Hi, everybody. I have spent the last hour and a half in traffic because the Seattle area has such a wonderful, wonderful freeway system designed for totally the amount of people that live here. Oh, God. So I left at what should be reasonable. I should have got here, in theory, like half an hour before the stream. Had plenty of time to set up. I got here 3 minutes before the stream is supposed to start. So needless to say, I speed set up everything. So if something's a little off, you guys let me know. Hopefully not. Hopefully we're just like, you know, crossing the I's and dotting the T's and everything just happens to work. Oh, Lord. I haven't even, like, set things out of my pockets yet. All right. So, before we dive into topic, just in case people haven't seen it, I was on the Aquarium Insider podcast, which is pretty new in the grand scheme of things. I think they only had 2 other previous guests, maybe it's 3. One of which being Ryan from Wild Fish Tanks, who's a super awesome dude. We were talking about just like mostly helping beginner planet tanks get started and what you need and all that kind of stuff. But it was a lot of fun. And Dan, who runs Aquarium Insider, is actually a really interesting dude. He's basically grew up on a fish farm. So sometime we're trying to figure out some scheduling, but I'm gonna like interview him and tell his story because I got to talk with him for quite a bit, both before and after we did the podcast, and just his experience, his story, who he is really interesting to me because he's you know, he's a active fish farmer. He's done all sorts of crazy stuff. So it's just interesting to hear perspectives from people like that who literally, like, breeding fish is actually their business. They are truly doing fish for profit. It's just interesting to me. I think you guys are really gonna like that when I can get it all sliced up and done and all kind of good stuff. We'll probably have to. Well, we'll see how we have to do it because he's in Florida, but we'll get it figured out. We'll kind of have some fun with that. I think you guys will enjoy it. What else do we got? Other than that, like me being on his podcast, and eventually I'll be talking to him, and we'll do something on my channel. What else is new? Let's see here. We got Fishtoberfest coming soon. I talk at my club basically that same week, and that's part of today's chatter will be about that. But what else we got? The online aquatic program, my dev who like lost her housing, by the way, a little while back, is I think finally getting settled so we can get back to work on that. Fun stuff, right? Eviction moratoriums be damned. She was kicked out of her housing, so fun times. But nonetheless, trying to to work with folks who, and she's like kind of a freelance dev, so she does a lot of small projects, and a lot of them dried up. The ones that were like paying a majority of her bills, so real unfortunate for her. But she landed a full-time gig somewhere else, so she's been interviewing a ton and is getting herself resettled. Should be okay here soon. We should get everything done soon, hopefully, now that she can get back to work on stuff. All right, I want to talk very briefly about this because for a lot of us that do have fish clubs, our fish clubs have been finding alternative ways to meet. A lot like how, Corey at Aquarium Co-op's been doing online meetings with his new club that he's put together for his membership. A lot of the established clubs have been doing things like using Zoom meetings for their members, or, some like Maasai, my club, the Greater Seattle Aquarium Society, and a few others have been holding online meetings, streaming stuff to YouTube, all sorts of stuff like that. But a lot of these clubs are starting to finally be able to do in-person meetings again. And for Greater Seattle Aquarium Society, this was our first meeting in 19 months. So closing in on almost 2 years before having another meeting. We finally had our first meeting, and it was informal in a sense that our speaker couldn't be there Tuesday, so they did a Zoom meeting with the speaker Monday, and just had the speaker's presentation Monday and some short club announcements, and then we did this informal meeting in a much larger hall than we normally have, with like half to a third, depending on who the guest is, the number of people present. So basically, like, everyone's masked. They checked to make sure you're vaccinated at the door, which, you know, whatever your personal opinion is on that, it's for safety's sake, right? We basically have to do that as a club just to abide by what is effectively required within the state of Washington. Because the state of Washington has some relatively strict rules right now in regards to the pandemic and gatherings and all that kind of stuff. And it's for everybody's, it's for public safety, it's for everybody's health. We totally understand that, right? But just let's leave the political stuff about that, because everybody's got a different opinion on it, right? Let's leave that out. They were checking temperature. So, like, I was showing up. I'm technically the person in charge of our monthly auctions at the club, which I'm probably going to have to step down from that role just because my work schedule's gotten so crazy. And I had to present my stuff. I had a mask on. It was a completely different location, so parking was way worse than it normally is. But we only have that for like one more meeting, and then we go back to our normal spot, which is much better parking. And had to get my temperature taken. My club president was making a joke. It's like, yeah, a little hot there. Got discus tank level temperature going on. You know, just trying to have some fun with the few of us who are coming through. But we had, I think, 30-something people there in a room that could, by full true capacity, could hold a lot of people. It's a part of Seattle Pacific University. And so we had, everybody's really well spaced out, which is nice. So for social distancing purposes and just everybody playing it safe. And instead of all the normal stuff, other than some announcements of like our Breeders Award program, our Horticulture Award program. Our Horticulture Award program, by the way, is so far behind that because of how long it's been, right? It's been 19 months. The chairperson, gentleman named Roy, who's a fantastic human being, he was like, okay, so here's all the things I had that should have happened up until the meeting that first got canceled. And then for the next few, and then I'm doing everything that was submitted in August. And then for the next few meetings, I'll be doing between 3 to 6 months at a time of catch-up of the 19 months we missed, because there's just so many awards that have to be put out. Right? It's pretty unreal. So, needless to say, we got to me, who I finally got my Master Aquatic Horticulturalist Award 8, which means I've done it 8 times. Spoiler alert, I've done it more than that during the pandemic. He's just so far behind, I finally got that one. So yeah, I have a goal to hit 10 before I speak, and I'm really, really close to 10. So we'll see. And then I think I'm going to stop for a while, or at least I probably won't be as active on that kind of stuff, because I've been plugging away at certain things, a lot of like flowering and stuff. We're getting out of the season where plants flower. That's how I've been making most of my points lately, but fun stuff. So we did some announcements about things that were coming up, and then after that, like, kind of a neat thing, because it was such a small group and we didn't have a speaker, we went around the room because we have a double microphone system, and we just had everyone introduce themselves and like talk about very briefly like what they keep, what they like, how long they've been a member, or if they were there and not a member, because it was technically open to non-members. And we had one person who was not a member show up. Maybe it was 2, and they both joined. They both joined the club that night, which was kind of funny. So after that, then we had a little club auction, right? And man, the people were getting steals at this auction. Like, I have no space in my tanks, but I was watching bags of shrimp go for like $1 a shrimp. And these aren't bad shrimp either. These were like high quality strain, like Lucas Brett Blues and like Painted Fire Red Cherries and all this stuff. And it's like, oh yeah, 10 to 15 shrimp, and they would go for like $15 a bag. Or they had a bunch of corridoras that showed up. All the corridoras went for between $1 and $2 a fish. Hoon Aquatics, a gentleman named Ryan, as Kelly Foreman is mentioning, I had to like try to pump his rainbows he brought in, because he brought in some Clausioensis, which are, one, a super cool fish. Like, I will tell you what I told my club, which is that this rainbow is like incredibly rare because it lives in something very similar to the Devil's Hole, which is there's a very limited area of water in this water system that actually is able to be accessed by human beings. And the rest of this water system, this technically stream that they live in, or river, is all subterranean. It's underground. So there's only an area that's something like a few hundred yards that is accessible by people and at the surface. And this is the only area where these rainbows live. So they're extremely endangered because they have a really, really small space. And they're beautiful, right? These are beautiful fish. Ryan has fantastic ones. So like Hoon Aquatics, if you've never checked him out, I'm going to go to his place at some point too, relatively soon, because he's been breeding like really rare rainbows, like an absolute champion lately. And it's just a guy to talk about. He's got a store on like Get Gills too, by the way, just in case. Like, I'll pimp my buddy there, but these are fish that normally sell for like $20 to $25 a fish. Bags of 6 fish were going for $22. Just, and I sat there watching this, knowing I have no room in any of my tanks right now. I can't buy fish. So I had to try and pump them a little bit so that I didn't feel bad for not spending money to buy the fish because they were so cheap. How screwy is that, right? They're on so cheap where I'm like, I feel bad that I'm not spending my money buying these. And then, it's so funny because we would have plants, like a bag of Anubias, and nothing special. We're talking like Nana or something like that. And plants usually go really cheap at our auctions. Sell for less than super rare rainbows or corridoras or shrimp. But the difference in their price was so little that it's like mind-boggling. In that if the prices were equivalent, the bags of Anubia should have been like, a good-sized bag of Anubias where you get about this much worth of size of Anubias and stuff should have been like $4. But they would sell for like $15. Right? Which is still cheap compared to the amount you're getting. But then you'd look at it and be like, but what? That's just nonsensical things to me. So that's that you had, because it was small, there's not as many people bidding, right? And also just in general, like, our club tends to have stuff go fairly cheap. So there used to be a thing where members of our club who sold online did not bring fish to club meetings because they sold too cheap. Which I always thought was kind of silly because you want to distribute your fish around the club. And it's always good to have more people in the area keep the fish that you love and you breed. Like there's a ton of people in the Seattle area from the club that have my guppies. But not because I bred them and brought them there. I sold them at first to a couple different members in the club. And then this one couple who the last name is the Crees, but they're phenomenal breeders. They have this amazing breeding room, and they bring them regularly. So they bring in their guppies that they originally got from me and sell them at our club auctions all the time. So anytime you go to a Greater Seattle Aquarium Society meeting, guaranteed there will be blue Hawaiian Moscow guppies for sale. Pretty much guaranteed. But it's not me selling them. It's been some of my friends. It's been other club members who are really awesome. Even like Alex Williamson, Secret History, has had them there for sale before. Just stuff like that, right? Because there's quite a few of them that have distributed in the Seattle area. because I want them to distribute all over the place, and I try to sell them like super cheap to locals, especially because I love that fish and I want more of that fish all over the place. So yeah, that was my experience. Like if at my first club meeting in 19 months, kind of fun, kind of fun. I liked how like super informal and just like everybody kind of got to meet everybody else. That was a little more enjoyable that way. The one thing that I will say is like the next meeting, I'm almost nervous about, partially because it's like I'm doing my presentation, right? I've been working on this thing, geez, a little over a month now. I've been working on it, and that's just because I changed the way I wanted to do it like halfway through. So I had to like scrap a bunch of stuff I'd put together and then like rework it and all this stuff. And like, I'm creating a PowerPoint presentation. A lot of this is going to be me talking to people, but I didn't want it to, how to put this? I want there to be slightly more of a story to it. You guys know I love telling stories, right? And the way I had written it at first was more of just like a generic informational thing, and I felt like it didn't fit the reason why they asked me to talk, right? Because it was just one of those, like, it felt more like generic speaker X, and I could probably get into a long rant about this, but I don't want to burn too much time of me ranting. I've been talking long enough as is without questions and stuff. But yeah, so next club meeting, and then I did, the good news on that regard, by the way, this will be kind of the final thing before we go into questions and answers. I got a confirmation from the videographer for our club that he'll give me all of his footage, either edited or unedited. It's my choice. I think he said, I'll just give you both. Because that way I don't have to like go back to him. So that we'll have my talk going up live on the channel a little bit after my club. They're not going to stream that live. They did some testing at our club meeting. There's one thing I forgot to mention. Like at our club meeting, they had a Zoom, and they had one attendee remotely, and this attendee like talked to, like, they introduced themselves, explained what they were into for fish and stuff, and got to hear everybody at the meeting. But basically, it was a demo to see, could we live stream in guest speakers who couldn't make it, whether it's because of travel restrictions right now or potentially some of like the elderly, as I like to call them, like fish legends, if you will, who can't travel just because of their own personal health. So, you know, you could talk about people like Rosario LaCourte, right? Randy Reed of Aquarius Podcast has recently had some interviews and conversations with Rosario LaCourte. That guy's fantastic, by the way. He's amazing. I want to be a fly on the wall in the room with that guy. But, you know, he can't really travel anymore. He's just, his health doesn't allow it. He's like 90 or something like that. I mean, he's an old guy, but he's a phenomenal speaker, and he's done so many things in this hobby. And he's like just an absolute master breeder. He's bred like everything under the sun. So being able to bring those people in using a little bit of technology, but making it simple and easy to set up, because we have a few really tech savvy people in the club, so we can help guide people along the way. Something they're kind of demoing for the future of the club. It's just kind of exciting to me, because that means we can get more global speakers too, who might not be able to make it to the United States, right? Or it could become cost prohibitive to bring them in because of the cost of their travel. So to bring in people from like Australia or Germany or what have you, which is kind of exciting. So they won't be streaming my talk, but my talk will go live probably like the week or two after. It depends basically on how much I like our videographer's edit. Joking aside, like realistically, it's just about what I have lined up in the pipeline already as to how soon that will go up, but it will go up relatively quickly. So yeah, all right. With that being said, we'll go to questions and answers. Make sure you do at Bentley Pasco. It makes it super easy for me to see in chat if for some reason I don't get to your question, or it's like really in depth and it needs more than just like a simple couple of minutes. Rico Stan has been thankfully putting in my email pretty regularly, bentley.pasco@gmail.com. Shoot me an email. I've actually caught up on my email, so I'm not like a week behind anymore. You'll get a response within 2 to 3 days, probably. No promises. It might take 3 or 4, but yeah, that's the goal. So I'm going to zip up in chat, try and catch a couple things that I saw some stuff early, and then we'll get rolling through questions and answers. Thanks everybody for being here tonight. I know it's like probably the tail end of nice weather for a lot of people. I appreciate it when you're here. Oh, Westfish tanks. Only 2 weeks later, no aquarium co-op run over. Yeah, you know, Corey's super busy. He's doing that thing. He'll just stream whenever he can, and then we'll see what happens, right? But it's going to get interesting because with my club meeting again, there's going to be one Tuesday a month, most months, where I will have a club meeting, and it conflicts with this timing. So we'll probably have like a video or something else in replacement. I've still got to figure some stuff out. I'm probably going to put up some polls in the community tab to ask people what they want in a replacement. Or I'd have to find a different day long term. So I'm not sure how that's going to fall out, because right now Tuesday is basically the only good day in my schedule. And I don't want to like trample over other people's time slots when it comes to live streaming, because my channel's too small to do that. I'm not like, Cage Tropicals or Co-op or any of them big boys. You can just be like, yeah, I don't care who's streaming right now. I'm streaming, right? That's not happening with me. But yeah, so right now, probably something like that. But let's see here. Jacob Hill. Hey, Bentley, you should try the JCMP CO2 system. It's cheap. I just got it, and I'll be setting it up soon. JCMP, man, I'm really debating how I want to proceed with what I'm about to say. I ended my affiliate relationship with JCMP for a really specific reason. And I don't want to, I'm not trying to badmouth them, but they have made some decisions at a company end that I don't like. It has nothing to do with the products. I think the products that they have selected and are selling that I have tried are good products. I especially really like their most recent lights, because I think bang for the buck, they're a really good light for what you're getting. They don't have quite the features of, say, like a Fluval or some of the other app-controlled lights, but for the cost, they're a really nice light, and I've seen thus far some really good mileage out of them without any issues like you might have in some of the older, cheaper LEDs you would buy on your Amazons or eBays, etc. But I don't want to, aside from the products I've already tried, I just really don't want to give them any more free publicity, if that makes sense. Like, I'm fine saying that their lights are a good product as long as you understand JCNP does not design them, JCNP does not make them, they are made by a company in China, they're made in bulk, they're ordered in bulk, they ship them to themselves, and then they resell them. Now, the difference in cost for you to purchase that same light from China and ship it to yourself, if you can find it in a quantity less than 50, because normally you do this through Alibaba or one of those, or through a manufacturer, and you have to buy them in a large number. The difference in cost, when you account for the shipping and all that stuff, it saves you so little money that it is, in my opinion, worth buying it from JCNP. Let them have their little markup, but then they're the ones that give you the warranty. And as long as they are cool with their warranty, should anything happen, which I've had all of my lights for like a year plus, and I've never had issues with them, which I think is their warranty's a year. But as long as you have that going on, then I think it's worth getting them fast, because when you order them, you're going to get them in a week and a half to 2 weeks, depending on shipping right now, because shipping's all messy. But instead of like 2 months plus that you would wait to get them from China. As long as you're okay with that, perfectly good product. I think they selected a very nice product, and they've chose to carry a very nice product when it comes to that light. But that's how all their products are. And I the fact that they were really unwilling and still are to say that that's how they're doing business bothers me. I morally cannot accept that because it's deceptive. Now, that doesn't change how I feel about the product. I think the item in particular I tested is a very good light. It is a very good budget light. Do I think it is the best budget light? No. Do I think it's hard to find a better deal than that light? Yeah. I haven't tested the Higer. I've heard the Higer is really, really good, but the Higer is similar. It's made in China, all that kind of stuff. But from everything I've seen and from what I've heard from other people, similar thing. It's a very, very good light for the money you're paying for it. And Higer is a pretty reputable company from what I've seen. So you would have them backing any of the warranties on that product and covering that product for you, instead of basically you trying to rely on random company in China fulfilling a warranty, which I'm going to tell you this, they won't. Right? If something goes wrong, they won't. That's it. That's my only qualm is that. But because of that, I ended my affiliate relationship with them, and I won't try any more of their products. It's a personal choice. I have to, in the grand scheme of things, despite the fact that I do YouTube as a hobby, I have to treat YouTube as a business. Right? I have to treat myself. This is going to sound kind of dumb, but I have to think of this as if I were a brand, right? And this is psychotic because that's not really how I like to think of things, but I have to make sure that every decision I make is something that I feel cannot damage my credibility. Because the second that my credibility comes into question, then why would you pay attention to me? Because I don't do this stuff to make money at this point. I lose money doing this stuff, but it's fun for me. But I have to treat it like in that business mentality of like, me is a brand, and it's so... This is how you can tell I worked in marketing at one point, and that is still somewhere in my brain. But I have to think about that, like, because honesty and integrity matters so much to me that I want it to be apparent and obvious at all times whenever I do anything with a product. Like, you're going to see how brutally honest I can be with something very, very soon. Very, very soon. Like, if you thought the Sun was bad, we're going deep. Deep. I'm going to talk about the Flourish line. The whole Flourish line. And how it's bull. Absolute bull. It's terrible for us as hobbyists. It's a terrible product line. Designed to milk money out of you. Yeah, that's not even the video. I'll start there. So anyway, I won't be trying their CO2 system. I hope that it's good. I really do. It looks similar to a bunch of other systems by other companies, so it's probably made by the same basic manufacturer, and if so, it is a reasonably quality product, but it has some flaws when compared to something like CO2 arts, or even better, like Greenleaf aquariums, where you know they're actually building them themselves. Not CO2 art, I think, is a little different, but GLA, for example, they build their own regulators in their own factory. They're really, really distinct about these things. Bob Purcell, speaking of CO2, setting up my first CO2 tank with the goal of Crypt Pink Flamingo. Okay. Looking at a 40 breeder with a CO2 art regulator. Speaking of CO2 art, I have them. I like them. Do I need a CO2 drop checker? No, but it can help. You don't actually need one. Also, light recommendation. So, on a 40 breeder, if your goal is to do a bunch of pink flamingo, you will want strong light. Not necessarily anything too crazy. Like, you could get away with JCMPs on that, but I would probably look at something like 2 of those, or like Higers, right? It depends on how many you have, how many of the pink flamingo you're trying to do, or where you're trying to do it, and the other plants in the tank. Because you could arrange the light to really push a lot of light on the pink flamingo. The thing to keep in mind is for Crypt Pink Flamingo, you need to get that bright pink color. You need a reasonable amount of CO2, so you're probably going to want to do something like 4 or 5 bubbles per second in your 40 breeder. A little bit higher than I would personally run, but that's just to give it a little extra boost. And then you need strong lighting. To keep that pink color, you really need strong light. That's about it. So you could do a JCMP. You could do a Higer. You could look at something like the fluval plant. Or you could go really crazy and do something like a Chihiros. You don't need something insane. You really don't. But you do need strong light. That's all. It's going to be a highlight requirement. So basically you want to get something that is probably something like 100 par after about 12 inches into the water, if that makes sense. I mean, if you can get something that's like 70 to 80 par at your substrate, you're going to have plenty, but then you'll risk early algae, so just be prepared for that. But other than that, yeah, it's pretty simple. It's not super demanding. It's just that is a really finicky plant because it is, to get that pink color, it's a genetic defect in the plant. So they're extra finicky, even for a crypt. The problem is a lot of times when they melt, they don't come back. So if you can find them potted and converted, like from Aquarium Co-op, I would go that route. They can be a lot harder to get happy out of tissue culture, but if you have good CO2 and good light, you stand a much better chance of doing that with the tissue culture ones. Hope that helps, Bob. Minister Brandon, Bentley, when you get rich, you can buy me a Bentley. Dude, if I'm buying anybody a Bentley when I get rich, it's gonna be my, like, dad. Or myself. Although, realistically, my dad is more of a Rolls Royce guy. He has a necklace. Random story. Because I've known this ever since I was a kid. It's always this thing that I remember very distinctly about my father that he's just always had. Is he has this necklace that's a little Rolls Royce grill. It's a tiny one that he got custom made. It's just a little pendant that he wears. He's had it forever. It's something I remember ever since I was a kid. I remember asking him what it was. And he was like, oh, it's a Rolls Royce grill. And I always thought it was weird that I was named Bentley, but he had a Rolls Royce grill and not a Bentley grill, because they do have a distinct difference. Or like the Bentley logo, right? The B with the wings and stuff. But no, that's just the way my dad rolls. But, you know, he's done all sorts of car stuff. He's done some crazy things. Crazy things. Oh, let's see. Lots of comments about the steels. Cancer train. Gold laser cories are going for $30 around here. My lord. That's a spendy fish. We don't have anything quite that crazy that came to our auction, but, you know, we had stuff like Trilineatus and some Venezuelan cories that were selling for like $2 and $3 a fish. You know, it's pretty cheap, in my opinion, because cories sell for like pretty good money out here typically. But yeah. Big City Batters, what's up? Haven't seen you in a bit. But I imagine you've been busy. Because didn't you move, right? Right? Correct me if I'm wrong. Correct me if I'm wrong, Amber, but didn't you move? This is how you can tell, like, I'm totally not, like, up to tabs with everybody. And then, Bob, yeah, I will be recording. My talk will get recorded. It'll be put out, all that kind of stuff. See your comment there. Some other discussions. Let me catch up to chat. Oh, there we go. There's all the @Bentleys. Let me make sure I didn't miss one up here. Dr. Prasad. I recently bought Bulbitis fern, African fern, and got it immersed grown with broadleaves. How do I convert it into submersed? So the easiest thing, especially with most of your epiphyte plants, which is what Bulbitis is they tend to actually convert the best. So what I would do is get it attached to a piece of wood or rock, or if you can, just get it freestanding. You don't want to plant it down into any substrate, right? Some of them will weigh enough that they'll just kind of, you can friction put them in place and they'll just stay down. Then just give them time. They don't need really strong light. They don't need CO2. It's just time and patience with Bulbitis. They could, a lot like a Java fern will, or some Anubiases, you actually might not see too much change to their leaf structure. They convert very, very well. Now, the big thing is make sure that those rhizomes, even though they're very small compared to something like an Anubias, that is their rhizome, don't get those things buried. If you can attach them to wood, it's great. They do really, really well on wood and rock. Wood especially, because they can grab in naturally with all their roots as they grow new roots. And from there, they'll be healthy as can be. I love Bulbitis. I used to have a huge one. And I was breaking down the tank and I didn't have space for it, so I sold it at a plant auction. And I kind of regret it because I don't have Bulbitis around my house anymore, and I kind of want some again. So I'll have to go get some, right? But yeah, pretty easy, honestly. Don't put too much light on it is my biggest advice. Like, it is a type of plant that when it's submerged, which it doesn't grow submerged, to be clear, in nature, but it can live submerged. It tends to be in more shaded environments or in like outcroppings along the shore. So try to not give it super bright light underwater, and then it won't get covered in algae. It's a lot like just Java ferns and stuff like that, where a little bit less light, medium or low light, and a slightly longer photo period. So don't try to do like only 4 hours. Give it like 8 to 10 hours of light, especially if the lower your intensity is, the longer your photo period you can give it. And it'll do fine. It should convert just fine for you. Should do just fine. Jacob Hill. Oh, that's the same one. Just repost it. I appreciate it. I think I answered that a little too in depth, but Bex, new question. When trimming Rotala indica, probably fake Rotala indica. Everything's called Rotala indica these days. It drives me crazy that it's not the actual Rotala indica. It's probably just Rotala rotundifolia, but good plant regardless. It's very pretty. Is it best to trim the top and replant them for propagation, or from the bottom and replant? So in general, what I try to do is I pick a rough height I'm trying to go for, and I will look for one of the nodes, so right where the leaves are, I'll trim directly above that node, and then I take that new stem and replant, right? I take that newer growth and replant, and you'll have new growth come out of the old as well, because you want to keep that root structure. And in general, like, you try to cut a certain amount above the substrate where you have leaves. Now, if you're not having a lot of leaves down low and you have just bare stems, the light isn't strong enough to penetrate down to those lower leaves. So what you want to do at that point, honestly, is you might look at removing those old stems and their root structures, because they're just not really going to come back to you too well. You want to make sure you have a few leaves present below where you cut, so that that plant can keep photosynthesizing while it triggers its new growth to come in. And then those stems that you clipped that are now the bottom is where the cut point is, all the new growth, that will trigger them to grow new roots. So if you just plant them in, they should be fine because they're already adjusted to your water system. So you should be fine. Especially that plant, it's a really robust grower. Typically, you could try and take like a almost like rosebush mentality, where you want to give them a certain amount of foliage below your cut point. And if for those that don't know, there's like an old school thing that my mom taught me back when I was a kid. It's about the only thing I know for terrestrial gardening is you want to look for a 5-leaf branch basically on the rose, and you cut just above that. So as long as you can count 5 leaves, you cut above that, and the rose will be healthy and give you more branching buds in the following season afterward. Yeah, I taught you about roses on an aquarium channel. I know, psycho, right? Gorgachev. Interesting name. Do ramshorn snails require 2 to breed? I bought plants in February and I noticed 1 adult ramshorn. I've looked my tank over and only 1 snail is there, no small ones. To my knowledge, yes. I think they do require 2, but I think they're also asexual in that you don't have to specifically have a male and a female. It's a lot of the snails tend to be like that, is that some can, however, sometimes you'll get a snail that already has been fertilized by another snail, so they'll lay fresh eggs, and those eggs are fertilized, and you can have 1 snail create more, but typically, yeah, I think you need 2 with ramshorns. Joe Davis, how was your time chatting with Aquarium Insider? A blast. What did you learn from one another? He learned about plants, and I learned about farming fish. I don't want to spoil everything, Joe. That would ruin the point of me interviewing him and telling his story, right? But no, seriously, I learned a lot about his history and like what he did because he really learned a lot uh, breeding angelfish, especially when he was younger. Still does them now, but does a lot of other stuff too. But the biggest thing I learned is that um, he's kind of a part of a group that is getting out of the typical distribution model that we're used to in the fish industry, where fish just don't get taken care of properly anymore. And some of the farmers are walking away because they make better money that way, but also the fish come in better condition and they work on either direct selling them or limiting the number of steps through that system of going to places like the big distributors, Seagrass Farms and some of the real big guys in the industry. And not to talk negative about them, right? They do a bunch of good stuff too, but just taking some of those steps away so that they have better fish arriving with their customers, because they don't want their customers to get fish, have problems happen because they've gone so many steps in the chain, and then be disenfranchised with keeping fish because every time they get fish, they just die. Right? It's kind of part of what like Dan at Dan's Fish is doing. Right? He's making it more direct, where it's direct from the farm or the importer, whatever it is. Instead of having all these different steps in the chain, it's going direct to that person so that the fish's overall health is better. And then we, as hobbyists, get a better quality product. I hate referring to livestock as product, but it's a product, right? In the grand scheme of things, any company sells a product, whether it's alive or not. But yeah, it was super fun talking to him. Super fun. Jacob Hill. So does Night Crew do the same? I don't know for certain. From what I can see, it looks like Night Crew is working with a manufacturer to do something, but I don't think that the lights they sell are as widely distributed. So what I mean is the same light that I would buy from JCMP, I can find under other names in other countries. So I know that they're not it's not like Fluval, where Fluval designs a light, sends it from their designers to a manufacturer in China, but only Fluval gets that light. You don't see like, Shenzhen Light Company, and that's just a Fluval plant with a different name badge on it. Whereas that's what happens with some of these other manufacturers that do that kind of stuff. And like, this is not something that does not happen in the industry. I want to be really clear. This happens in like every industry, right? Most proprietary products for a lot of different industries, they're not 100% unique. Some are, but yeah, not all of them are. Most of the time, they're carried by many different companies, but a lot of companies will have like a country exclusivity or something like that. Or they're the only one that sells it a certain way. Stephen P., the Flourish line of slightly flavored waters. Oh, we won't even start there. Fish Guy Nick, any comments on Nylock G-Ferts? They're great. The thing is, so Nylock G, Aquarium Co-op Easy Green, and frankly almost every actual all-in-one, true all-in-ones, are the same. There's very small differences in their chemical formulation, which means that one has slightly more nitrogen or slightly more this or slightly more that. But in the end, they're all very similar. So it's just a matter of finding which one works best in your water. Or you just support the business you like the most. So like for me, Aquarium Co-op's really close to me. It's very convenient. But I've also tried a lot of Brightwell stuff, and I like a lot of Brightwell stuff. And those are the things I use. Right? But I could switch to Nylock G, and it would probably give me almost the exact same results as Aquarium Co-op Easy Green, or as Dustin's Grow Juice, or It will not give me the same results as Flourish because, yeah, Flourish isn't a true all-in-one. And there's some other ones out there that are not full all-in-one, so you have to mix and match some stuff. So it kind of depends on what you're trying to do. I think it's fine. Like, Nylock G, which is Colin G, right? It's just Colin spelled backwards. He makes a lot of fertilizer for a reason. It's a good product. A lot of people use it and love it. He's got dry stuff. He's got liquid ferts. Yeah. I really can't say much more than that. I've met him. Seems like a nice dude. Haven't got to talk to him at length or anything. It's not like I'm out there like building the Bentley flavor of of aquarium fertilizer. I don't plan on doing that anytime soon. But, you know, they're all pretty much the same. Small differences. Small differences. Chat skip. Perfect. That's how I know I'm way behind. Desert Fish Keeper. Last time I asked you about my water, which was very hard, but turns out my new source water less than a mile away has lower KH. The stratum took my pH from 7.5 to 6.5. Wow, that's a big difference. Got some Rotala orange juice and has grown about 4 to 5 inches in the last week and a half. Wow. So I would say if you're growing that much, I just realized I totally forgot to close the window that's over that way. So you're probably hearing road noise in the background. I'm sorry. I would say if you're growing that much, like, let it grow. Depending on how big your tank is, get like 8 inches of growth and then you're good to trim. It's all about what you're trying to do with it. If you're just trying to propagate it for speed, like if it's grown like 5 inches, that's enough. And you could clip all that new growth off and propagate or sell it if you're trying to sell the plant. But just make sure that you don't over harvest it to the point of where what is rooted can no longer give you new child plants. So be ready to replace those over time with some of your trims and establish new starter plants and be willing to like remove the old rooted stuff. If you're trying to just like farm your plants long term, if you're going for more of that aquascape look and you're trying to get like the one really nice photo, then, you know, you keep replanting and letting it grow dense over and over again a couple of times until you've got you really nice bushy looking section. Get your photo, and then from there you start destroying it and rebuilding it. If that makes sense. Bob Purcell, would a single fluval plant 3.0 push enough light for most of the tank? Yeah. Should. You just might have to like purposely put your pink flamingos directly under the center of the light and adjust the light a little bit and have a slightly dimmer spot either toward the back or toward the front, depending on how you shift it. But then you could just have less demanding plants in those areas and you'll be okay. Kelly Foreman, can you recommend an auto doser? I sometimes forget to fertilize because of me brain. I do the same, to be fair. So as far as an auto doser is concerned, I'm trying to remember. Corey talked about the auto doser he uses at one point, and I would just go with that brand because it's actually a pretty good one. I can't remember the brand off the top of my head right now, and I'd have to go like digging through really old aquarium co-op videos to find it. It was the same doser he was using on his 800 like early on when he first had it planted, and I think they use them in their warehouse to dose their plants and stuff. He's talked about them before. It's a good doser. I think it's like a 4-pump if I remember correctly, but I would go with that one. Not that that's a great piece of advice because it's not exactly what you're asking for, but it's kind of what you're asking for. You could use the dosers that all the reef people use. You know, like whatever they hook up to Apex controllers and stuff. Those work just fine. Most of the dosers all do their thing pretty well. Let's see here. Sean Lancaster, do you know whether Crypt costata is the same as Crypt albida? A handful of sites in the U.S. sell it under both names, some only as costata. I saw some as albida on Tropica's site. So costata is actually, and albida are two different scientific declarations. They're not the same, technically. They look very similar, but the difference comes into when they flower. So when they're immersed grown and you get their flowers are different. Costata, I actually have costata in this tank, where like albida is a pain in the butt to grow, low tech. Costata is not. But yeah, they technically are different. They look very similar. So albida brown and costata look very similar in coloration when they're submerged. They're different from my understanding. Now, technically, if you really wanted this in full detail, you would look at like the Aquarium Plant Bible from Crystal Castleman to like get the true details on what the difference is. But the difference should be when you get that flower and you can actually look at the flower inside the spathe. It is different on each plant. Paul Sotero, Bentley, you're correct on the rose printing. I know I am. Scary Terry. Yes, this is a Durham Bulls hat. I hope nobody thought this was a Denver Broncos hat, because I do not like the Denver Broncos. I'm a Seahawks fan, but this is a Durham Bulls hat, mostly known for the movie Bull Durham, for those of us old farts who remember Kevin Costner when he was young. But yeah, man, it's my Durham Bulls hat. I had to have them. They're such like a classic team for minor league baseball. They're so well known because of that movie, but other reasons. Had to have that bad boy. Alley Cat, scroll back to my question, please. I'm trying. I talk too much. It's my problem. The problem is I see you talking a bunch to, like, Kelly. Okay, found it, Allie. Now that I have a 29 gallon, saw a crack from one corner heading across the 20 long. Oof, that sucks. How far should the Fluval 3.0 be from the lid using your day sim? Well, okay, so you're doing the same length light, so it's a little less power, but a little more height. If you can raise it up about 3 inches, perfect. I think you should be perfect. Now keep in mind, don't take my settings perfectly as is forever. See how things work in your tank and make small adjustments. You might need to bring the lights just down a little bit, or maybe just up a little bit, whatever it may be. Don't be afraid to like tinker with it, right? All of my light settings are basically guidelines. They're there to give you an idea of where to start and then just make small adjustments and play with it. Don't be afraid to play with my light settings. Just because I've said it once doesn't mean it's like, the gospel. Every tank is different, so sometimes we need to make little tweaks. I have a couple of tanks that have my day sim, but they're ever so slightly tweaked. Because that particular tank and its plant load just does better with some small changes. Like maybe it needs a touch more blue light than I actually have, or maybe it needed a little bit more pink light, or maybe it needs slightly less cool white or less warm white. And sometimes it's small. You're talking like a 2-3% difference. But don't be afraid to adjust. Don't be afraid. Use it as a guideline. Start there. Watch how your tank takes those settings and then go, oh man, am I dealing with algae all the time? Let's turn that top end down a little bit. Bring it down just a little bit. Make it a little less powerful. Maybe we'll see a little less. And then once you get it to where the plants are going fine and you're not getting algae, perfect. Stay there. You've got it. You've locked it in. There you go. Hope that helps, Allie. Kelly Foreman. Let's see. We did that. You and Stephen P. are like making each other want to spend money, apparently. All right, now I'm trying to catch up. Let's see here. Paul Soltero. Bentley, at the last club meeting I went to, the cribs, 5. I brought the auction, went for $1 each, while the group of stir-bys, 5, sold for $45. Yeah, that doesn't surprise me. Like, stir-bys are bred everywhere, but they always go for a ton of money, which is amazing to me. And cribs, like, just don't get enough love. I like crebensis. When I get my, like, garage fish room done, I'll have crebensis again. I miss mine. I just don't have room for them now. But I miss watching female cribs court the male. Like, I love that behavior so much. Look how to shimmy and shake they do, and they dance the males into a corner and just like, you're going to give me babies. Come here now. It's great. It's so different from rainbow fish, where it's like the males are going, crazy, shaking their heads all over the place, lighting up, doing all this stuff. It's the opposite behavior. It's like it's just super interesting to me. Bob Purcell, thanks for becoming a member, man. Welcome to Suna McGill. You'll see some there's some other member stuff coming here kind of soonish. I actually have a small member, one could call it rant. Maybe it's a video. Who knows? That will be showing up relatively soon. Bex, you're speaking my language. I enjoy gardening as well. I actually don't enjoy gardening because I'm terrible at terrestrial gardening, but I learned a lot about roses from my mother because my mother loves roses, and I had to help her with her rose garden when I was a kid. So roses are like the one thing that I love keeping. And, well, okay, that's not true. I love Japanese maples, I love roses, and I love camellias. Those are my things. That's all my jam. Your usual, like, rhododendrons are nice, and the blue-purple flowers. Wow, my brain is just like, boop. Hydrangeas, right? All your bushy flower stuff that's, like, unkillable almost, that's the stuff I like, because I don't have to do much to it, and it will live and look pretty. Because for some reason, like, if it's an aquarium plant, I'm good with it. Terrestrial plant, terrible. I've tried to grow tomatoes a couple times, and, like, I never get them ripe all the way. I probably plant them too late is my problem, because, you know, I'm like always going a million miles a second. Eventually I'll get good at that stuff. Toad Tamer, awesome name. My slower growing plants like Anubias and Alternanthera reinecii, I know you're AR, are getting a flat brown algae that's very hard to remove with a fingernail. Yeah. I run CO2, Dose XL, Fluval, plant on Daysim 2 hour and 2 hour zero ferts. Oh, is that like the 2 hour aquarist? I'm not sure about that last part. So that particular type of algae usually is not enough flow and too much light. So depending on how tall your tank is, we might need to bring the intensity of your light down a little bit. So you might need to take your Daysim and like bring it down a little bit so that it's not as much power. That particular type of algae is really hard to get off. Basically, the easiest way to remove that type of algae is citric acid, which means you have to remove the plant, use a small amount of citric acid and water, and use like a toothbrush, and it just comes right off. And then you rinse the plant and put it back in place. Yeah, the maintenance on that sucks. We can mitigate that type of algae by lowering the intensity of the light, improving the flow a little bit, and a lot of it is just small micro amounts of detritus settle, and then the algae takes over on those things. Or we can get really good surface algae cleaners, so things like your Imano shrimps and a lot of your snails in there to help keep that clean and deal with some of those things so that we're not dealing with them long term. The other question is, like, it might be a matter of how your water change schedule is. If you're not water changing frequently enough, it's more likely to get that kind of algae. Where I normally see it is on my Anubias that is getting too much light. It goes away if a little bit of shade happens, but in things like your Alternanthera reinecii, they don't want to be shaded, but they also can get that if you don't have enough flow whipping around them. And I'm not saying like you have to have a ton of flow, but just you need a reasonable amount of flow to move stuff around your aquarium. So sometimes something like a 5x turnover or 6x turnover is what you're looking for, roughly speaking. And the easiest way to do that is something like without the flow being disruptive to your plants, like knocking your plants all over the place, right? Doing this kind of thing. It would be to look at something like a canister if you have one that has a spray bar. And that makes it pretty easy. Richard McCarthy, any thoughts on their trace product? So is trace referring to Flourish Trace? If so, like I've suggested to a lot of people as an additive on top of a standard all-in-one. If it's a different trace product, then don't worry. We're going to go in depth on that stuff soon, but not in a live stream. Let's give you little peeks on it. That'll be a full video. I think you guys will probably appreciate my psychosis. Mr. What's in the cooler? Hopefully something tasty. I have had this 50 gal tank for about a year, and even if I change out nearly 20 gal, within days the water is darker than tea. All right. So my question, unless there's some extras in here, is how much wood do we have in this thing, and is it like Malaysian driftwood? Because you probably just have something that's naturally giving you quite a lot of tannins. Now, that dark color isn't a problem. That can be actually extremely helpful for your fish. See, the thing is, humic substances, which is what tannins are, they go into a greater classification of things called humic substances. And if you ever really want to get into this, look at Tannin Aquatics online. Scott, who runs that place, is like a blackwater guru. He's a fantastic dude. He's got a blog. There's all sorts of cool articles. Really nice guy. I've seen him talk at my club. I think we're trying to bring him back here soon. He's just super awesome. But the thing is, in those substances, and namely in tannins, there are natural anti-fungal, especially, but also some antibacterial properties that act basically like a continual booster, if you will, to your fish's health. So tannins are not a bad thing. Now, granted, a lot of us don't necessarily like looking at our tank and seeing, an Arnold Palmer color in our water, right? We're not looking at like, well, that's my nice giant glass box full of iced tea. We're trying to have like that crystal clear water usually. However, if you account for the fact that you've got a lot of these tannins in there over time, there's ways to get rid of it. So number one, you can have some really fine filter floss in your hang on the back or canister or however you're filtering it, and that's going to pull a lot of that stuff out of the water. You could also use carbon to remove some of that out of the water, that fine polishing. What is the Purigen being one of the better ones, because supposedly it's not going to affect your plant fertilizers and stuff like that. As much as I might personally wonder how you can prove that claim, but that's the thing that's out there, and a lot of people tend to trust it. Now, if you don't care so much about the color, you're more just like, I think something's wrong because of the color, don't freak out. Tannins are good. Tannins are great. Now, the other thing we can look at is how much, if we get under the wood or leaves or whatever we have there, how much extra mulm and stuff is lying around. Can we vacuum that up? That might help alleviate some of that. But if you have a relatively new, like, big piece of a Malaysian driftwood or something, that's going to leach tannins for a while. They just do that. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. If it's just an aesthetic thing where you're like, I'm tired of this dang tea water, totally understand, right? Crystal clear water looks amazing, looks beautiful. The few times I get it right, I feel great. But if it's a fear that that's a problem, don't be afraid. Perfectly healthy for your fish to have tannins in the water. Like, a lot of fish actually do better in tannic water as long as you don't get the water too acidic, right? We want to make sure it doesn't get too acidic. We want to buffer that water accordingly. They'll do better in that because it naturally is like being in think of it like being in a spa, right? And it's just all those like healthy things where you're like, you naturally are surrounded by better food and all this kind of stuff instead of like, potato chips and a candy bar or something. And yeah, I know they're not eating it, but just think of it that way. It's more like, lightly medicating in a sense, naturally. It's like eating the organic food instead of the hyper-processed stuff. Think of it kind of like that. It's the weirdest way I can think to explain that, but yeah. Rico is a mod. Bentley must be desperate. It's true. It's true. I am. Elaine, can you tell why aquarium plants need fertilizer when the purpose of plants is to absorb the waste? I like this question. The short answer is this. The waste, so ammonia and nitrate, only provide a portion of the nutrition that the plants need. So think of it like this. If you only ate chicken, plain, just oven-baked chicken breast, nothing on it whatsoever, could you survive? Yes. Would you, in the end, have nutrient deficiency issues in your body? Oh, yeah. You need calcium. You need a little bit of copper. You need a little bit of this. You need a little bit of that. You need this. You need that. You need B vitamins. You need this. You need A, C, D. You need all those things, right? Plant fertilizer is what gives us all those extra things that may or may not be in our water or in the things that are being produced by our fish. So while our fish waste will give us a little bit of phosphates and a little bit of either ammonia or nitrate that produces nitrogen in the long run, which is what the plant needs, we're not getting our calcium, we're not getting potassium, we're not getting boron, manganese, magnesium, all these other little nutrients that your plants need. They're complex organisms just like your fish. They need a complex diet. Fertilizer is a more complete food. It gives them everything that they need, as long as you're doing all of the right stuff. So if you're doing like EI dosing, where you do macros one day and micros the other day, between the two of those, you're getting all the stuff you need. You're getting the meats on the macro days and your veg on the micro days. Think of it like that, and it makes perfect sense. Don't think of it like it's just helps them grow, but think of it like their full necessary nutrition. Then you're all right. Hope that helps. I hope that's the easiest way to understand that. That's the way that I think of it in my head to make the most sense. It's like, I like to often joke to people when I want them to explain something to me really, really simply, instead of being overly technical. I do this at work every once in a while, as I will tell them, explain it to me like you would to a golden retriever. It comes from a movie. It's like, explain it to me like you would to a small child or a golden retriever. It's just like, basically, don't be afraid to talk to me like a complete idiot so that I understand. Okay, so we're getting close to ending here. I believe Dr. Black will be coming up next. Let me check. There he is. He's in chat. He'll be coming up here shortly, but we'll get a couple more questions real fast, and then we will be done for the evening and return next week. All right. There's one I saw in here. I want to make sure I get it. Lester saying, thanks for the Aquasky series so far. Helpful and informative. Glad you like it. Going to get one for my immersed boost tank. Any special tips for immersed settings? Well, so keep in mind, you don't have diffraction, but you also shouldn't be dealing with any algae. So in the case of boosts, especially immersed boost actually likes higher lighting amounts. So push that light strong. Go for strong lighting on immersed boost, and you'll be fine. You might need some springtails, but you should be fine. All right, I'm going to make sure. I want to get back. There was William McCullough. How can you make the Fluval Roma 240, a really specific tank request, outlets more powerful as they are not powerful, and I have cleaned my filter? Other than, is the Roma an internal filter? I don't know the Romas that well. Hold on. Fluval Roma 240. I need to actually look at this thing. So that's a 63-gallon tank. Oh, yeah, this guy. What kind of filter do they put with this thing? Included. Oh, it has a 307? So, my question is, how strong of a flow are you trying to get? Right? Because if it has the Fluval 30 series, whether depending on how old it is, 306, 307, whichever one, that's a reasonably powerful filter. If you're using like a spray bar, it's designed to diminish the amount of raw flow output because you don't want it too powerful for certain fish. Depends on the fish you have, William. The other thing I could say is, do you have extra stuff inside the filter, or do you have an intake sponge or something like that that is going to reduce the flow some? You just might not get like ridiculous flow. Also, make sure like the choke's not up somehow, or that you don't have something lightly choking any of the different points in which you can restrict the flow to the tubes and stuff, like the lock valve and things like that. Just make sure all that's down as much as possible. But if you're trying to get like 10x or 20x output out of the thing, you're not going to get it. It only pushes so hard, but it pushes what should be plenty. Now, the other way that you would get extra flow would be to add another filter. So you go get another one of the same filter, and between the two of them, you would get far more flow over time, right? They don't put too powerful a filter with those kind of tanks very often because they don't want to put something that's overbearing for you, the user, so that it's a little more user-friendly and you don't necessarily have to think all the time, like, is this too much flow for the fish I bought? Or can these fish handle the flow of my tank? They want to make it easy so that, like, any fish could go in that tank, in theory, right? That would be about all I could say on that one. Other than, like, being there in person and trying to give some advice. But I hope that helps a little bit. Scary Terry. I used to live in Raleigh, just outside of Durham, and used to go to their games all the time. Haven't seen one of those hats in a long time. Dude, I love minor league baseball, man. Just like so many of the different mascots and stuff, and they're just more fun. Minor league teams are more fun. Although it has been nice for once, the Mariners almost look like a decent baseball team. It's only been like, 20 years. Oh man, my Major League Baseball team is terrible, and my football team let me down over the weekend because they forgot how to play both offense and defense in the second half of the game. For those who are sports ball fans, but if you're a Tennessee Titans fan, I'm sure you were very happy with that fact. Ugh, ay. All right, one more question, and then we will be done for the evening. Joe Davis had a collection of Japanese maples. Nice. Oh, pig escaped. No. I have one Japanese maple at my house. I've joked that if I ever won some like ludicrous lotto, which math says I won't ever, but we can dream, right? That I would build a big koi pond and have Japanese maples all over the place. I love those plants so much. I love Japanese maples. Oh, Bex 420. Well, 410. So you said a lot of Rotella indica on the market is fake other types. How can you tell? My Rotella's leaves turn pink towards the top and have pinkish stems. So that's just Rotella rotundifolia, and sometimes it's called indica as a variety. So true Rotella indica is what's actually called Rotella bonsai or Amania bonsai. Depends on who's selling it and whether they use the wrong name or not. But True Rotella indica, by scientific standards, what is the scientific naming, is now known as Rotella bonsai. Don't worry, that's still a great plant. The naming is just a common name that a lot of people have used because of old mistakes, basically put. Is live oak safe to put in aquariums? I don't know that I put live oak in. There's risk of, so any sap of a tree you want to be really careful about, right? Like for example, I think maple you just can't put in, but you basically want to have stuff that's like dried out completely. You don't want to have stuff that has anything active sap going into your water. Generically speaking, we're gonna go real generic with that because it's tough. All right, guys, we got one last thing that I'll talk about as far as a question in the chat, sort of. Mike Stambaugh, it's not really a question, but it's a thing that's interesting to me. Did you see Gary Lang has a pretty good deal on his Tewa Creek ornates? 6 fish for $20. Yeah, I did. That's before shipping. Keep that in mind. But, yeah, I did. I don't have room right now. So, yeah. D. Durham, I don't know what I'm going to think if you ever put water. I keep it low on purpose. It's not as bad as it's been, but yes. So I have 2 reticulated SAEs in there, and they jump a lot. And even with the lid on, they have bashed. You can actually see. You see how the lid's like not on all the way? That's because they hit it so hard they knock it up. Yeah. So if you're, for some reason, if you're in the Pennsylvania area, there's the Keystone Clash this weekend. Just look up Keystone Clash on your Googles or your Bings or whatever the heck you use these days. Your DuckDuckGos, whatever it is. You'll find it. If you can go, people like Gary Lang are going to be there. They're going to have all sorts of awesome deals on rainbow fish eggs. There's tons of fish to get brought there. All sorts of African cichlids and stuff. It's a really fun event. It's in, I can't remember part of Pennsylvania it's in, but it's a relatively major area. Go there. It's a lot of fun if you have a chance. Other than that, I unfortunately won't be there because, my travel's limited these days. As always, guys, thank you so much for showing up tonight. Bob, welcome to being a member. And, oh, yeah, there's like 20 fish tubers who are going to be there, and apparently including Rico Stan. Hey, you can meet Rico. He's a really sweet dude. Really, really sweet dude. Morgantown, thank you. Southeast area. There you go. I got somebody who lives in Willow Grove, so maybe take a little trip, huh? As always, guys, thank you so much for watching. And as always, stay awesome. Have a good night. See you next week.